All right, hey guys, welcome back to tutorial number 2 in our little series of how to build a web interface for the TR1. For those who don't know, the TR1 is a human-sized robot. It's available on our website at slaterobots.com/TR1, and it is a human-sized robot that's an order of magnitude more affordable than anything on the market. And like robots and you're into programming robots, this is the platform for you. So we're going to, with this tutorial series, going to be diving into how to program some different applications for it, so you can see what that process is like. And this one in particular, we are doing a web interface, and right now it's running in Gazebo, which is a simulation environment. In a few episodes down the road, once we get this application up and running to where we like it, we are going to run this on the actual robot. So stay tuned for that. So just again, to recap even more, you can see that we can look around in this little environment. We've got this mini map up here where we're looking at. I just sent a go to position command for the end effector for the left arm, and it is moving to that position. We can drive around, all that kind of stuff. We've just got to add some stuff to our environment. I've got all kinds of ideas for what to build. I was just realized this morning on my way to work that you wouldn't actually need to do anything crazy on the computer vision machine learning side in order to do some pretty basic, because I mentioned last video I want to be able to like right click on stuff and get a little, now this is just the Google Chrome pop-up, but I want to be able to have like an actual pop-up that runs in the program, and you've got some options for, you know, if there's an object there, you can interact with it, you can pick it up, that kind of thing. Now, actually pick up objects, manipulate objects, you're going to have to do something on the computer vision side, but we could, for the time being, potentially build something out and right-click on it and actually calculate what the exact coordinate is that you clicked on and be able to move the end effector and move the robot to that position. So I think there's lots of cool things we can do. We could also do that with the mini-map, where we could click in the mini-map. I don't know if you guys ever played RuneScape, but it's starting to look a little bit like RuneScape. Okay, so that's where we're at now. There's all sorts of ideas that I have for what I want to build on this. This is my favorite time of the day, where I can just come in here and program on this stuff. So let's talk about where we are currently, or where we got last episode. Okay, let's close out of that real quick. Let's move me down here. And of course, you guys have any questions or comments or anything about how to do stuff, I mean, you can ask that here. You can also ask that on our website, and I or someone else will be more than happy to help. Okay, so we are working in this TR1 Control Center TUT folder. And in fact, let's pull up our terminal and go into that folder. Did I say folder? So TR1 Control Center TUT. And let's see. So we worked a lot on the server back end. We've got one more thing to set up with the server. We got to set up this command section. Also for today's video, I want to get the launch file set up so that we're running Gazebo in the background, and you know, maybe we can, you know, display our first image or something like that, or our first video stream. So let's get right into the news. Okay, so command. I'm going to have to open up a second window over here real quickly so I can see what we're doing. Okay, so command. Let's talk about how we're going to set up our little object here. That is my cheat sheet. Okay. So we are going to create an index.js file here in this command directory for TR1 Control Center server router command, and this is going to be our entry point for actually getting the command route. So what we're trying to build here is we're trying to build some sort of way where we can easily add different command line features down here, right? So for example, I have this go to position. In fact, you probably can't see that. I have this go to position command right here where I can enter in, this is the X position, the Y position, the Z position, and that gets passed to the server, and this actually gets sent to a command route. So it's posting data to localhost 8080 command, and I believe it's going to be like go to position or something like that, right? And so whenever I press enter here, it's actually looking for, okay, what's this function? What's the name of this function? Okay, that name of this function matches to this, so I need to look for these arguments and pass that to this particular route under the command section. And then on the server side, I've got, I will have a list of commands that we can accept, and that where the logic has been built out that we know what to do with it. And yeah, so that's the basic gist of what we're getting at with this. Okay, so let's dive into it. Okay, so we're going to have a few dependencies. Let's see, express equals require. We're going to use, so this ultimately is going to be a route. So we are going to use express. We're going to set this up just like we've set up our other routes before. Express.router. We're going to use the path dependency. See, actually we don't need, it looks like we don't need these right now. We are going to use the Ross Node.js library here, because this is going to initialize our node. And then we're going to set up a couple different functionalities within this route. So we're setting this up quite a bit differently than what we've set up our other stuff before. And again, this is just so that we have a basic, what do you call it? Just a template, right? For so that we can easily add the different. So we're going to have these different commands, but these different commands are probably going to need something on the ROS side. So they might need to publish data to different ROS topics. They might need to subscribe to data. They might need to know about the different messages and the different message types. And we need a way to be able to go in and easily add these things, because I'm going to keep adding to this list of commands, and eventually we're going to have a bunch of commands. So you can type into the terminal and you can do any sort of functionality that you want. So let's do, we don't actually have this file yet, so we're going to have to go in and create all of it. Hubs. And then CMDS. Okay, and again, this is our list of messages. Let me move me down here. So this is our list of messages. This is our list of publishers. This is our list of subscribers. We're going to be able to have some logic in there, and eventually we're going to be able to get to where we can just dynamically, as different commands need and don't need different publishers and subscribers, that we can just kind of dynamically handle that within each of these classes, essentially. Okay. So, and then now we're going to actually create our commander object. Commander function. Again, this is just the way that I've done it. There's a million ways to do this here. Oops, router. Okay. And hopefully this will all make a little bit more sense as we dive into it. Okay, so we're going to create this commander object that is going to use all of these different classes. We're going to run this function, and it's going to do something to the router so that we add the different routes to the server based on what we have in our list of commands. Okay, so that. So we're going to use some local variables here. States. So here's where we're going to set up or initialize our node. think we could probably call this anything. We'll just call this control center node. So we're going to have a node handle that I believe this node handle gets initialized when we do init node. So I think this init node is necessary. I could be wrong on that, but okay. And then this is where we're going to have our messages, new messages. Again, this is a class, and we're going to actually accept the commander as an object or as an argument for this messages object. And the reason we do that, and the reason we've set these variables over here, is so that each of these have access to the node handle. And that's where we're going to do our publishing or subscribing to different ROS topics. And that's where you really get all the cool functionality at. So just a few more lines here. Oops. Man, why do I keep doing that? New subs, this CMDS equals new CMDS this. Okay, so that should be, oh, I forgot one more thing. So our CMDS function is going to have, our CMDS object is going to have a add to router function where we pass in the router. And this is the whole point of doing all this, is this line right here. So that we're going to have, we've got all of our state set up through here so that the CMDS can easily add, publish, subscribe to ROS topics. It's got the list of messages. We've got the node initialized. And once it's done all of that, then we can go in and start adding the different commands. And then we'll just run that function and then export the router. Okay. So, if you've got a pulse, you can probably guess what we're going to set up next. And that is going to be our messages, our pubs, our subs, and our CMDS. Okay, and this is what our command directory looks like. And now we're just going to go in and create, I think it's just, yeah, we'll have just single one files in these, I believe. Yeah, just one index file to just describe the class there. I've set this into folders. I could have done just a pubs.js file here directly in this directory. I haven't done that. I've put it into folders just to, as this gets bigger and this code base gets more complex, that I can add that. I can easily add that complexity into it. Okay, so let's do messages. We'll create a new file here, save messages, and this is just going to be index.js. Okay, how are we doing? Is everybody doing good? Okay, I wish you could respond. All right, so let's look at that file. Let me pull that up over here. So we're doing messages. Okay. Now, we're going to require ROS node.js equals require ROS node.js. Let's make sure we're using JavaScript syntax highlighting. We're going to export an object. So we need to export our, here we're going to export our messages object, right? So that this file, when it requires this messages directory, it's going to look for index.js. Here's our index.js, and we need to make sure that we export the object that we want. So here, we can also see the way I've set this up is that the messages class or object requires a this it's inputting the commander object itself as an argument in a commander instance. We're going to have one basic public function, right? I mean, it's all public with JavaScript, but we're going to have a get function. So here we're going to store our list of messages, and these are ROS messages. These are the message types. You've got your standard messages, your sensor messages, your geometry point messages. These are the types of data that you're passing along on the ROS topics. So this is going to keep a list of all of that here that we're using within our commands. So this get function is going to have there's going to be two basic ways that it's going to work. Either you pass in this message name and you want to actually get one particular message, or if you don't pass in a message name, okay, so if this exists, then we're going to run some certain code here. If it doesn't exist, we're going to run, we're actually just going to return our list of messages that we have stored locally here. So this dot messages equals that. It's actually going to be a dictionary. Okay. Okay, so now if they do want a particular message, okay, so let's see if this dot, so let's say they're requesting a message, and let's say that message actually exists here. So we actually do have that stored in our messages variable. We're just going to return that. Message name. Now let's say we don't. We're going to actually just attempt to add that to our messages variable. So messages message name equals Node.js, or it's ROS Node.js. Let's see. ROS Node.js dot require message name, and so this just gets a particular message with this message name, and it may or may not, there may or may not actually be a message name that you're requesting, because you could technically request anything. Ideally, you do some sort of error checking here, and this is where I'm talking about, later on we can work on, implementing something like that. It's a bit more complicated, but this is good enough for now. But we've got room to grow, right? So this dot messages message name dot message. So I actually need to return dot message here. Okay. I think that's mostly good. Now I do have over here that we're just going to, by default, add sensor messages to this. I don't know why in particular, but that's just what I've got here. I'm banking on that this is a dependency somewhere. Let's see. So messages. Okay, so there we go. There's our messages object. All of this just so that we have a little bit of logic, so that later on when this CMDS object wants to look at messages, or wants to get messages, or wants to use these messages for publishing and subscribing to ROS topics, that we've got kind of a dynamic way to do it, and it's a little bit intelligent in that we don't have to go through this ROS Node.js require function, and that we've got that's just stored locally right here. Okay, so that was fun. Let's do the next one. Now we've got to do let's do subs. Yeah, we're going to do same thing here. We're going to do index.js. And there we go. There's our file. Okay. Let's see, right up there. Okay. Now this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Okay. Ross Node.js equals require, so we're going to require Ross Node.js again. Let's see. Yeah, this does get quite a bit more complicated. So we're going to have a sub. So again, we're going to ultimately return a subs function, a subs object, and that object is going to handle our list of subscribers that we're using. There's going to be a little bit of, it's going to work kind of the same way that the messages did, where it's a little bit dynamic. But here we're going to actually have both a sub object, where it's going to take the argument topic name and message type, right? So we've just worked with this. And then module.exports is going to be the actual, here we have this called commander. So this is a sub object. This is a subs object. So this is a one instance of a sub. And then our subs object is going to be multiple instances. It's going to be our lists of all of our subscribers that we're using. So since this is simpler, we're just going to set this up much like we did with the messages. So we're going to have a .get function. We're going to say what's the subscriber topic, what's the Ross topic that we're subscribing to. And yeah, this is the exact same kind of thing. So this dot subs. So if we've got yeah, actually this is just if they passed in the subtopic variable, we're going to look for within our local variables here if we've got that or not. If we don't, well, so we'll work with all that logic, right? If they didn't pass in an argument, then we're just going to return this dot subs. Yeah, okay. So this is all working very similarly to what we've built out just a second ago. Subtopic. So if we've got that defined in our local variable there, we're just going to return it. Subtopic. Now here, okay, so here, I don't have built out the ability to dynamically add a subscriber to our list here based on the subscriber topic. And I'll show you, you'll see, because we've got this whole object here where we're going to create our list of subs. It gets a little more complicated. I think there might be a way to do it, but for the time being, we're just going to throw in here. If does not exist. Yeah, we're just going to throw this error here if they try to get a subtopic that doesn't exist, right? Okay, and I'll show you why in just a second. Or it'll probably make a little bit more sense once we go through creating this actual sub thing. Okay, so if you're familiar with Ross, you'll know that you subscribe to a Ross topic, and then as data gets updated, you can have a callback function and say run this code given the data, and every time that something gets published to a ROS topic. So that's subscribing, right? So what I've got here with this creating the sub object is that we can have multiple people subscribing to that particular ROS topic, and I can keep a list of all of the callback functions that are necessary for that subscriber. So that way, I don't know actually if there's really a better way to do that, because we're working with JavaScript. But anyway, that way it just keeps everything in memory and should be faster. So we're going to create like a list of the callbacks. We're going to call those our listeners. And we're going to have some different functions here where we can add a listener, we can remove a listener. We can keep track of what the previous message is. So that's really important, right? So let's say you're running some code alongside this like subscriber callback function or subscriber object, right? Like, so you're continually getting data as things are updated on the ROS topic. But let's say you're running this code over here that's very synchronous, and you need to know right now what's the data for this thing over here, for this particular ROS topic, for a particular joint state or something like that, right? So what do? Well, what I've got here is that I'll keep track of what the last message was, or the last thing that was published on that ROS topic. I'll just keep track of it here. So if you want really quick access to it, and you're not too worried about the data going stale, okay, and we can keep track of like timestamps or something. We can say that, if it's over a certain time, we can implement all that in the future. Probably the best way to do it is just make sure all of your code is, asynchronous. But that's not always easy to do. So we're just going to keep track, since we know that like the joint states, for instance, is like, that's not going stale unless something just catastrophically goes wrong. And we can just keep track of like, okay, here's the previous joint state, and then you can just always grab that previous data without having to go through the whole asynchronous callback functions and all that kind of stuff. So that's some of the kind of functionality that we're building out here. So we're going to keep track of our listeners, and then here's where we're going to have our previous message. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so here we're going to create a hook function. So this is going to get handed a message, and we're going to need to know what the state is of this particular sub for this. Now we're going to use this down here. So anytime that you create a new sub object, at the very end of all of this, you're going to do node handle dot subscribe topic name. We're also going to pass in the message type, and then this is where our callback function is. Hook. Okay. Okay. So now, so this hook is going to be running all of our listener functions. So all we're going to do here is we're just going to loop through I equals 0, I is less than this dot listeners dot length I plus plus. So all we're going to do is just loop through our list of listeners, and we're just going to run the callback function with that particular message. Listeners I dot callback message, and then I also want to keep track of this dot previous message equals message. Okay, and that's all that we've got there, right? So we're just going to, in fact, I don't know, maybe we should do this. I think that would probably be better. Okay, so we've defined this hook function, and this is going to run in our node handle.subscribe, topic name, message type, this.hook.bind, and anytime that there's an update to this particular ROS topic that we're working with this topic name and this message type, we're going to run this hook function. We're going to run all of the listeners that are listening to that particular subscriber. So now we just need to add some functions for this dot add listener and this dot remove listener. We're also going to have this dot get previous message. Okay, so let's do add listener first. ID listener method. Okay. This dot. So here we're just going to push a listener. We're just going to push a object to our listeners array. In fact, that should be listeners. And here we're going to have an ID, which is going to be that, and then also our callback is going to need to be defined, which is our listener method here. So we can see that whenever we loop through our listeners object and we call this callback function, each one of our listeners here have to have a callback function. And we also have this ID defined so that whenever we do this dot remove listener, we can do we can find that in in our list of listeners. I'm actually just going to copy and paste this in. It's just a for loop, right, where we go through and we loop through each of the listeners. If we find a listener with that particular ID, we just remove it from the array and return. Okay, just for the sake of time, because I can feel that we're running late. Okay, so function, we're going to describe our get previous message function, and here nothing more than just return this dot previous message. Okay, I think that is one of our more complicated bits of functionality here. Yes. So we will exit out of that, and we're going to create one more file. We're going to do the pubs. Man, this kind of stuff takes a lot longer than I thought. Okay, so now index.js, save. There's our file. We go to pubs. There it is. Change this to JavaScript, and there we go. Okay, we are 33 minutes into it. Man, we are not making nearly as much progress as I thought. Okay, we're going to give it about, we might go to 45 minutes this time, just to hopefully make some progress here. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're creating with our pubs class. Okay. All right, so same thing. We're going to require, ROS node.js, require ROS node.js. Module.exports is going to be our pubs object. We're going to accept the commander as our one and only argument. And same kind of thing, this dot pubs equals, so we're going to have our dictionary of different publishers, and then we're also going to have this dot get. This is going to be our, basically our public function. We're going to accept the particular pub topic, and this is all pretty much the same thing that we've been creating here. You can tell that there's a pattern here. Again, if we don't have a publisher that it's asking for, right now we're just going to throw an error. I want to, in the future, add the functionality so that it does dynamically add it to our list of publishers. But for the time being, that's just a little more work than I like to bite off at the moment. And we're also going to use, by default, these list of publishers. We're probably going to need to add the ability to easily, add some different like this.add functions and stuff like that to this pubs object. This is just kind of boilerplate, but it gives us something to expand upon where the interfaces for other for the different command routes down the road. The interface with this object should be pretty similar, so we've got some basic foundations here. We see that we're adding our go-to position, and in fact, we're going to make sure there's continuity there. So we've got our go-to position publisher. We've got our effort commands for our wheels, for our head, and so now whenever you do, like, so let's say you're working with, you're going to set up a command, you can just do, what would be pubs.get, and then you can say, get me this publisher, right? And then I think you'll be able to do, you'll actually be able to publish data or something like that. We'll see specifically. I can't remember because this item in the dictionary is actually this node handle .advertise. It's the object that gets returned here. So this would be with the Ross Node.js. This would be according to their spec. But I've got some code here I can look at so we can remember what the actual interfaces for that is. So now we have set everything up except for this CMDS folder or class. And now we're going to do that right now. This, unfortunately, is also a little complicated. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to have it in, we're going to create our index.js, and we're going to save that under CMDS. Save. We're also going to have a template.js. And then here's where we're going to have our list. Okay, so finally we're getting to where we are adding lists of commands, and we're going to plop them right here. And so our index.js is going to be like looking within this folder, like looping through all the files there, and using this template function, or this template file, the class that's defined in there, and using that to instantiate each of the items in the list and start adding routes to it dynamically. So here's where we can say we want to add a new function. All we have to do is just go into this list folder and just create a new file. We don't have to change anything here. We don't have to change anything here. And that's going to make it really easy going forward. Okay. So this is our index.js for our CMDS. So again, we're going to loop through the different files in that folder. So we're going to need to require the file system for Ross. And we're going to actually return our, we're going to return a CMDS object. And if you remember from this file right here, our main command route file, that CMDS has to return an add to router, or has to have an add to router function. So we need to not forget to add that, add to router function. I mean, this is, again, this is the whole point of doing all this, is so that we have a way to dynamically keep track of the state, and also dynamically add items to our router, the actual HTTP URL, right? so you can go to these different routers, and actually it's going to be so you can publish data to them. Okay. So let's see. So we're going to So we're going to need to make sure that we got our list of files. So we're going to do var files, and this is going to be an array of all of the things that we've got in this list folder here. And it's just going to be file names. So fs read dir sync. Oops. Dir name. You might remember that from last episode. And list. So we're going to say what's our current directory, and then go within the list directory, which is right there. And then we're going to do a for each after that, and then file. You can tell that I copied this from Stack Overflow because this is not the same kind of format that I traditionally do with JavaScript. So files.push, and then file. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, there we go. So now we're just going to loop through all the files here, and then for each file we're going to push it to our files. Wouldn't we be able to just do this? I feel like I should be able to do that. We're going to try that, and hopefully I don't break everything. Okay, so here we've got our list of files, and now we're going to need to turn, since we know what the files are, we're going to need to turn those into actual command objects using the template. So we're going to do cmds equals, so we need to keep track of what all of our commands are that we have, and we're going to, in order to initialize that list, we're going to loop through I is less than files.length I plus plus. So we're going to add cmd equals require list files I. Okay, so each one of these, I don't actually think we use the template.js. I think yeah, we will see in just a second as we get through some of these, adding some of the things in the list here. I can't remember. I don't know if we use this template.js. Okay, so we're going to require the actual file that's located at the current directory list plus whatever the actual name of the file is, and then we're just going to populate that just .cmds .push, and then it's going to be new cmd commander. Okay, so this is going to return an object where we're going to need to pass in our commander, so that whenever each one of these commands runs, that it knows what the publishers, the subscribers, the messages, and all that kind of stuff. It's aware of all the state there. Okay, and then we're going to do this .get. Return this .cmds. We're just going to return that entire array, and here we're going to, whenever we need to add to router, this .cmds .length plus, and we're going to actually just do router .post. Okay, so whenever you run the post method against this route, then our router on the back end is going to run that code. Okay, cmds I dot. So each one of these cmds files are going to have a path defined, and then actually what the route is. .cmds I dot route. Okay, so that's all that is, you'll see that each one of these files, they're not very long. They're no more than just a few lines of code. And that is definitely the way that I like to work. Once you have these huge files that are, a couple hundred lines of code each, you've probably got something wrong. That's hard to maintain. So I built all of this, as a way to, I initially built this differently, right? But I've done all of this as a initiative to refactor all of the code and make sure that everything's neat and clean and easy to maintain. Okay, so let's actually go into our list and let's create our first route. Let's see, what should we do? Let's do the look. So we're going to create a look.js. Yes, and I've now noticed that we do not need this template.js. That's hanging in there from some old version of this code. Okay, because all we're going to do is now we're going to actually return an object that has a path defined and a route variable defined. So we're doing module.exports function. We are passing in the commander, and then we're going to need to define this dot path and then this dot route. Okay, and the route is actually an express route that we're defining. So this has the normal request response functions passed in. The path is going to be look. So that's all we've got there. So this is just the basic code that you need. If you're going to run, or if you're going to add a command to our list of commands that you can type into the terminal, it's going to be a file that you just add to here that has a path defined and the route defined, and that's all. Each one of these is going to probably have some sort of list of arguments that, so we can get more fancy with this, where we describe a list of arguments. We can kind of abstract this probably even more. Where we do create a template, that's probably a good idea to add something like that in the future. But for the time being, this is a piece of cake. So this is, just to back up a little bit, this is our look function. So that this is a command that the front end is going to use if you want to actually send effort commands for the head as it looks up, down, left, and right. So this is just going to be a basic route that we can point to and say, when you type in a certain key or something like that, like send this data to the server so that this route right here can actually publish that on ROS, and it can actually move the head of the robot. This is a piece of cake, right? Because all we're going to have is two main data points, right? Pan and tilt, and that's just going to be request.body.pan, request.body.tilt. Okay. So, all right. So this is where we finally get to first use all of the code that we built initially. Okay, so we're going to publish some data to a ROS topic. We have to go to the commander, which is the highest level object that we're working with in kind of our nested array of objects, and we're going to look at the pubs object, which is an array of publishers. It's an object that contains an array of publishers. And then within that, we're going to call the get function. So we're going to get a particular publisher. And we're going to, and that's just going to be this wonderful little string over here, which is, we're going to publish to the joint head tilt command ROS topic, which is a effort controller. Okay. And then here's where we're going to publish, and our data that we're publishing is our tilt variable that gets passed to us from the front end, right? So this is coming whenever data is posted here. This route's going to run. We're going to look for a tilt variable defined in our JSON body object of the request. And we're just going to publish that here. And we're going to do the same thing with joint head pan. And I'm going to do that here. Where are we at of time? 50 minutes. Holy cow. Okay, this is going to be a long one. We're grinding through it today. I hope this backend stuff isn't boring you because it's a little dry, but it's totally necessary. And if we're going to move forward with this, you got to kind of know how this backend's going to work. The front end stuff's probably more exciting, but we'll get to that at a later time. Okay, so we're also going to, at the commander object, keep track of the states. Again, so that if we have other processes that are running under this commander, or or even other commands, they want to look at what's the current state of different things. I don't know if we'll keep this long term, but for the time being, I've got it. So we're going to add to our states here, and then response.json. And again, I don't think we need this long term, but we are going to return the current state of the robot. I've just recently figured out a way to set up WebSockets so that the front end is continually updated with what's the current state of the robot. So I don't know if that's super necessary. Or if that's going to be necessary moving forward, but that's what I've got for now. Okay, wow. So all of that, 50 minutes plus of work, we're looking at 52 minutes now, just to set up this command object. That's took a lot more time than I thought. We're going to have to cut it there, I think. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a list of commands here. I've got, and I can show you here. Here's what I've, that's me. I can show you, this is the actual folder for where we're at currently. And we can see I've just got a drive function that works in the same way that the list, or the look does. I've got a get joint states, route defined here. I've got a save route. I really want to set up with the robot to where you get a speaker hooked up to it and you can type in things to say. I think it's going to be really useful if you're not actually at the house and you want to either mess with people or you can actually practically use it. And then the go-to position, which is send an XYZ position that you want the end effector to move to. So that's the list. I'm not actually going to. The problem is without the front end, it's hard to actually test this without setting up a whole bunch of stuff. So next video, we will go ahead and add the rest of the commands to the list. We'll set up a basic front end, and we will set up the ROS launch file with some of the dependencies so that we can finally test all of this and see that it's working. And yeah, this was a long one. Who knows? The next one might also be super long. So if you have any questions at all, feel free. Let me know down in the comments. And I will look forward to reading your comments and seeing your questions. And I will catch you all next video.